How's everyone doing? Okay, let's talk about parenting. And I want to make something completely, entirely clear. This is not a guide to parenting. This is not a slam down to parenting. It is coming to a point of understanding of various things that have happened, nuances and behaviors that have happened that have been passed on even to parents of parents and parents to parents. And there's certain things that we don't necessarily acknowledge as parents that we kind of can retrospect and notice and spot and within ourselves, which is one of this interesting and weird aspect of early parents, or how do I say that, young parents creating kids, but then us technically being young enough to go back into retrospective and understand some of these behaviors with the technology and stuff that we have now, to also let go of, let's say, various mannerisms and stuff that have happened. Again, understanding that the unconscious aspect of some of the unconscious aspects of our mind are picked up from early environment, early behavior, and early folders. I love to call them early folders. It's much easier to understand it that than simply the lens, because when you see the concept of early folders and the way that as a kid 0 to 9 you learn like a sponge, but you don't have anything to cross references to understand nuances and definition, because kids having this kind of word jargon would just be more for love, playfulness, and things about creativity that's fun, instead of deep human inquiry, unless they are, helped to understand this and not forcefully done it. And some are forcefully done it. It depends on the scenario again. But it's saying that we haven't really all had this aspect of diving into nuance in this river and flood of words and understanding and definitions. As kids, we were doing that kind of momentum, but for something that was fun, playful, creative. So there's a difference to that. And of course, if we're not trained that way or help to understand things in such a way, then it's hard to pass them on, and that's why, again, I'm saying, not a slam down on parenting, not a guide. You will pick up some interesting nuances here and there, and never ever 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 fucking let the mind make you feel as if it's a slam down or it's attacking you directly, because you're about to understand how that concept works, and it's really fucked up. Okay. Something that is needs to be spotted when it comes to parenting, especially as a parent, especially as a person, is the old tendency of feeling represented by your kid. This is a plague to your mind. That concept, that idea, okay? That idea, that equation and value is a plague to your mind, because there's been multiple cultures bringing up that idea when raising kids, especially when going to another country and wanting to look good, and that was a certain period of time, okay? So they would have these idea, possibly subconscious idea, because again, habits being passed on. Could be a subconscious idea of your kid represents you. So their behaviors, their grades is a reflection of you. And this is a bit of the same pitfall when it comes to teaching. My students represent me. So if my students go and be a way that's not really something that I align with, or maybe they're falling in their own pitfall because I can't read their mind, well, that represents me. No, that is a narrative for storytelling, but that is not a thing, because that's kind of like saying your best friend represents you. And guess what? This is where we jump into non-duality. Maybe not. Here are the nuances. The maybe not or the not is basically because you are two different people with two different granularities of experiences in event with granularities of emotions leading to it and granularity of momentum. Again, 7 billion on this earth, you will not find a person that will have the exact same pathway leading to a habit and a behavior. They not even the same definitions. If you're expecting the same definitions from a kid or anyone else trying to put that burden on you and expecting a kid to have the same definitions as you, so, oh, okay, so they're representing you because you guys have the same definitions, right? Of course, with the same context and granularity and lifetime. Whoa! And same lifetime? What the fuck? You know, you just put a pause on that because it kind of goes, same lifetime. They're only whatever age they are. So, kind of have to understand there was this idea of being represented by your kid as an adult. So if they misbehave in school, maybe that's a bit of you. And I'm glad that this mentality is changing, but if it is still present within some of you, notice the point where I just kind of went, whoa, it makes no sense. Of course, because we have different levels of, how do I say, we have different sizes of experience, if you go into that way, as well as, which includes definitions, nuances for various different terms and words. You can't expect a person that doesn't have the same age and doesn't have that same growth to know that. And no one else should expect that of your kid and then pin it on you. So you start kind of understanding some of the weird little things that it kind of set you up. Because now, you know, looking a bit deeper into the context, more than simply the cyclical behaviors that were passed, there were social contexts that led to these. And looking at these, you know, just giving them an eye, understanding that they were at the time, normal, or they were at the time normal because they didn't understand the aspect of the mind. They haven't really dove deeper into the mind compared to now because we have more technology, more time to look into it. We're not fighting in wars. We're not having battles. In the aspect of, medieval time, you need to kind of start to understand this cyclical behavior of the expansion of humanity, the evolution of humanity. So when it comes to these aspects, yes, they're silly, but from now's point of view, then it was, again, not enough people asking enough questions and looking into the mind, seeing the interconnection, because it's like, I am working on this, I am this one person, I am doing this profession, and there was not this kind of now interconnection, which just pushes you to a whole different level. That being said, understanding that you kind of detach a tad bit, not completely, but there's a certain aspect of detachment that you have from an unfortunate concept that happens in various, again, social standings or structures or national or ethnicities as well. This aspect of the trophy child. Because upon you detaching from and watching out for that pitfall, you watch out for it not to fall into it, but you also ask yourself what's better, which will somewhat lean on, because it depends on the situation, right? There's no overall better. Again, not a guide. But you step away from the trophy child behavior, which has parent reacting over and over and over in a negative way to what is essentially a growth experience, a learning and growth experience. Remember, learning is not just in school. It's not just the grade. It's not just the paper. You learn every minute, depending on how much attention and awareness you have on those various things happening around your life in a non-dual aspect. Not only in a non-dual aspect, but, you can supercharge it that way. So you detach. You kind of see the child's reaction more as a learning experience. And this is where, again, you kind of ask yourself, well, how would I want it to be taught at that point? With that early brain that just ingests, doesn't necessarily have enough context and nuances to make those analysis or go back and forth or even really have the ability to fully select a choice, because it just happens. I'm just learning. So this is my one choice, or my idea of a one choice at that time, when not knowing how to. Go back to that early brain, zero hard drive. You, as a parent, this is one of the best exercise you can make. Go back to when you were a kid and how you started to make associations, and kind of understand some of those folders in your hard drives are going to be blurry as beep, you know, because again, there's not enough context and nuances to kind of dive into it often enough to have an analysis. So it's kind of like, okay, well, this is that, that's it, that's all. And it's not necessarily looked back upon early on. Again, early brain state, you just ingest. And this is going to be your master key to parenting, or one of the many master keys you'll discover in your life, because you'll discover more. This aspect that early on, the ingest, you just keep ingesting, so you don't necessarily have that same experience that you may have from your projector, your lens, your hard drive. And this is where, again, going back to understanding, reactions tell you what's going on inside your very own hard drive, not what's going on inside them yet. Okay? Because on the spot, you're reacting to a behavior that they're showing, but you have no context to the behavior. You don't necessarily have their internal context, because are we supposed to understand and learn our internal context on our own as a kid with all this kind of word jargon while we're busy doing the word jargon on something that we prefer and like? As again, you have to get into that mindset, which is something that wasn't there present prior, which also led to a lot of pain to various people. Because if you're continuously bombarded with someone else's strict perception or strict vision of what reality is and what behaviors are what, you know, their own associations to certain behaviors, certain parents, and we've heard stories like way back, even possibly now, certain parents will not let their kid be kids. They will not let them do a mistake. They will just snap at them immediately. Oh my God, your shirt's untucked. This is happening. This is happening. This is happening. And it just fucks with you. It literally does. And of course, again, remember, non-duality. It's not their fault, because they were taught the same way. So you can start seeing how this kind of stuff passes down, because when you're taught the same way, you're kind of taught that this is a being in the mind, and reacting to someone else being in the mind is a natural behavior. Yet, when you see it as natural behavior, you don't necessarily ask, is this healthy for my life? Is this healthy for my relationship with others? Is this getting me to grow? Am I growing for this? From reacting to someone else's lack of control to their emotion. Unconscious lack of control, yes. But it's still back to the main question. Is it healthy? Is it growing? Is it loving? And when you take the time to ask yourself those questions, you kind of go, well, no. Would I want someone else to do the same thing to me? No. Did I ever like it? No. And you let go. Because, again, it took you to ask those questions to realize it. Yet, let's say people still acting in those ways haven't got to a point, or haven't gotten the chance as well. You know, there's so many factors of possibilities and percentage of reaching that question somehow. Hey, maybe you've landed on a YouTube video, but even seeing a YouTube video doesn't mean that the person is going to listen consciously and ask themselves the question, or even pause the video and then ask the question. It doesn't mean that. Again, you can see all the possibilities and factors, and you're not going to start finger pointing and say, well, they should. No, because maybe they don't know. Maybe it's unconscious. Sometimes we don't necessarily value these kind of things, or get to a point to value these kind of things. Sometimes they're not interesting. Sometimes there's not in our focus. Sometimes there's nothing that's leading us to understanding how it could be interesting to do this self-reflection. And again, best thing that you can do for yourself, because it spreads onto various other areas in your life, and then spreads on to everyone else. Because as you do this introspection, and you ask yourself, okay, what gets me to grow? And you have the mirror back and forth, which is tricky, really tricky, especially when you're not taught that early on. This is why I say it's not a slam down and it's not a guide to all. When you don't necessarily know that from early on, it is really tricky, but you can make it simply by just practicing a tad bit more and more and more. And don't make it a need. If you make it a need, then you're going right back to the ones and zeros, pass, fail, need to be, can, anger, mind reaction. And that is the exact same thing as the trophy child complex in certain parents. I need my child to do this because I need to have other people's approval. But you don't think about how the brain forms ideas, behaviors, and habits. You haven't necessarily checked it aside from a surface level. And the people judging you as a parent, they don't even fucking know either, because that's all surface level judgment. Now here's the part. You're not tied to your kid, but at the same time, your behavior does tie you to their behavior. Because depending on how you react later on, they will, early brain, subconscious. Oh, okay, this is normal, right? Yeah, this is normal for me to react to another person's reaction. And that's the trap I was kind of talking about in the previous video. There's a weird term that's called empath that people have started to label, which is why, again, I love deconstructing labels. Because it's just a behavior. Over time, especially when you deal with reactionary parents, you get this skill, or a thought of a skill. I'm not necessarily sure how we could really redefine it, but it's kind of like a behavior where you feel bound to someone else's reaction. Meaning, after a while, especially with that kind of parent, the Dorothy parent, you're trying to figure out how they think, or what would they think if you moved. And that mind barrier, again, what would they think if you don't need to think about what they would think in a certain way, unless you're being an aggressive asshole. But you don't, in the context of that, of the trophy child, okay, that behavior becomes a knot. It becomes separation, because your actions will be filtered through that process, that lens of someone else's reaction is more important than your own well-being, or your actions leading to your well-being. And that even goes, you can even go deeper into nuances at how you do the action, because some parents are snappy about how you do certain things, and they've learned from, again, various aspects, or they still have the whole trophy child. So upon understanding that, you don't necessarily want to even that behavior, okay, the over neediness to fit in a box, I think that can also be the over aspect of people pleasing, the over aspect of compassion. Again, it's an extreme of compassion without the balance of wisdom, which is, you will never, ever, ever know the granularity of context within anyone aside from yourself, because you are the one who lives with the experiences. You are the one who lived the momentum of those habits and thoughts and behaviors. You're the one who understands those definitions, because you've been at the various places or environments that had various definitions that had you to that understanding. So you cannot force that on anyone, nor you cannot force it on yourself to need to know that exterior aspect to the extreme, to a point where you're not even letting yourself express yourself, to a point where you need to be completely buttoned down and sure. When it comes to that kind of parenting, they are making themselves and their kid, but they're making themselves initially miserable by having triggers, unconscious triggers, continuously looking at everyone, and especially their kid. Like, it develops on their kid, but then develops on anyone. They've learned it from other people, but it just makes you miserable. It's just trigger, reaction. And what's unfortunate is, it's from the projector's point, not necessarily having self-realization, it always points towards the other person, which in the household always points towards the kid. It's the kid's fault. It's the kid who does that. The same way they were blamed for other people's reaction. So you can start seeing this cycle, and the creation of this aspect of being overly reactionary to someone else's reaction is trained over and over and over. So in that way, yeah, you do have, they are a bit of a representation of you, but also in the good momentum upon you understanding that and just having, again, there is no ultimate good, ultimate right. It's just understanding. Would you at that age want to be treated that way? Would you at that age want to have those assumptions on you without you necessarily understanding the context? You take that time and also build this aspect of relationship of, I'll never really entirely know what context, what definition, what understanding is, and also why you like the things that you like, but I understand it in a general way. I understand, it's kind of like saying, I won't understand you loving first-person shooters, but I'll understand you having fun. I'll understand you growing. I'll understand you making friends. I'll understand you connecting. I'll understand you kind of diving into those nuances and you figuring out what you prefer. See, there's a difference between emotion at that point. You don't feel a need to know why this specific thing. You kind of just understand, okay, yeah, fun, passion, pleasant. You get back into a more general aspect when it comes to others. And within yourself, you enjoy your own nuances. You also allow yourself to step back from time to time in an aspect of a general way to go, okay, yeah, I like first-person shooters in general, but I also like video games in general. And here's another range of video games that I like too, not staying narrowed down. Or it's kind of like saying, I like Call of Duty, but I also like a different range of first-person shooters. You know, you stay in that aspect of general. You go back to various pillars of generality. And you kind of understand, for myself, I'll understand the various nuances and specificities. But for everyone else, I don't need to do it. Because once I need to do it, it's the mind. Ones and zeros. And that's your own personal pain. So, yeah, I understand. Like, again, looking back at the cyclical behaviors that were kind of, or cyclical rules and behaviors that were kind of placed upon parents. Oh, your child totally represents you. And the amount of stuff that makes you think that you don't necessarily need to think or give a flying blip. Yeah, I understand. It's quite a game for you guys. Like, it's going from let's say an intense momentum on your own to figure that out, or to play with those balances and nuance, because after a while you kind of get the hang of it, to an even more intense aspect, because you want to reflect upon yourself about what your reactions to this close by family member is, you know. And it's this aspect of, there's attachment and detachment, again, non-duality, but you are kind of literally placed in a stance where non-duality becomes your best friend, and you investigate more and more and more often, and you take that time of reflection at night or whenever you want, you know, just to go, okay, well, how's this going? How's this great? What would be best? And now you're forced to think in an aspect of unity. You're not forced, but now you get this amazing scenario that you'll think more often in this aspect of unity towards others and yourself, or back and forth. Because right then and there, you are living with this person. It's just like a relationship to a certain degree. You're diving into a deeper level of that unity. A relationship is let's say a specific range of thought that you're going to have about that unity. But then you get to a kid, and it kind of gets you to reflect back early on. And that also gets you to a deeper aspect of unity. Plus, it's really fucking cool because you get to understand, oh my god, that's how our playing hard drive works? Look at this baby. He's just loving everything, playing around, doesn't necessarily know what's going on inside his body, or her body, or Dave, whatever goes, you know. they don't necessarily know what's going on inside their body, so they'll react and cry, and you get to play the mini game of, okay, so why are they reacting and crying? What could be this? What could be that? But you're not going, baby's crying, baby's crying. No, you understand that. You understand that early on. You had no definition, so it's like, something's happening. Something's happening. Ah! You know? Because you don't have the wording. You don't necessarily know what's going on. So you get to see this magic, you know, this discovery aspect, and you get to relate again to how you were. And again, it's kind of like you're getting a live, you get this live aspect of creation, you know? That's super cool once you take the time to acknowledge it and understand some of the various nuances, and you kind of play with this. You don't, no ones or zeros. There's no need. There's no right and wrong. But you kind of go, all right, they have none of that too. They're not forming a good, bad, right, wrong, 1, 0, this or that. No, they're just playful. They have fun. You know, you get to see all that. You get to connect with all that, depending on how you allow yourself to do so. Because at times, and you know, unfortunate cyclical behavior and pass down, oftentimes you might not even want to think about this. Oftentimes you might not connect to that kind of thinking. And, you know, it just gets you on that different momentum. So, again, congratulations. You've just entered an amazing growth period, or an amazing growth opportunity by having a kid. Same goes for relationship, you know? Because you get to understand more of that back and forth mirror aspect of, okay, how would I feel if I acted and behaved, or someone else acted and behaved like that? What do I prefer about these kind of interactions? You know, it's not what do I prefer the other person to do, is what kind of interaction do I prefer, and how do I kind of help go that direction, or how do I represent it myself so that the kid may learn and understand this. They may not necessarily understand the whole word jargon, may or may not, you never know. Yet by you and your behavior, your emotions displayed, your reaction, because if they break a plate and you don't react, they'll kind of go, and you kind of go, you try to explain why, you know, you don't react. You explain why it happened, and you kind of ask their context as well. What were you trying to do? You try to pick this up in one way. You know, that's an example. It's an easy example to go for because they'll naturally break something at one point, which is all right. Because they don't necessarily know how to pick certain things up with dexterity. Again, you'll just take a paper plate and show them. But accidents happen. You know why? Because it's growth. You learn that way. It's not necessarily an accident. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Again, terminologies, right? And definitions. But when you understand, okay, they're trying to pick something up and they don't necessarily have the dexterity, well, okay, how do you get the dexterity? What are you going to focus on? Which is, woo! Don, user Don, double props because it was brought on from chain momentum from the last video. And you're going to, the next part or that next follow-up video, which I'm feeling just channeling this shit, is going to be how, again, I said, creating your own reality, which is also ties into this aspect of your focus. Depending on how you focus on certain things, you're going to be focused on, oh my god, the plate is broken and blah, 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 what did you do with this? And you go reactionary. Or you're going to go, okay, it's just a plate. I can buy another one. That's nothing. It all depends on the way you kind of focus, your focus of thought, which then creates a momentum. So it is a super cool, interesting topic. And also going back to the empath, just take out that term. You do not need to be overly associated with one's reaction, but you can understand it. It is not giving the middle finger to anyone's reaction. Again, that's going into ones or zeros. Watch out, the mind will mess with you, depending on how often you've been in that kind of mode. It's not ones or zeros. You understand someone else's reaction, and you do not feel associated to it, or you do not feel associated to your behavior, to your action, to your wording, to your movement, because you understand that the reaction always comes from within the hard drive. So it is not you did something wrong. It is not you said something offensive. It is not you are XYZ from someone else's perspective. It is their perception that is having them trigger to reaction to any actions or reaction, and you can start seeing a chain of reacting to a reaction to a reacting to a reaction. Look at forums. Easiest ways to kind of sort of notice a majority of people in the mind, because in the forums you don't necessarily have this back and forth to understand nuances and such. At one point you get really tired of typing and you're like, well, if you don't understand, you you know, you kind of get tired of, or you won't even go, and you see a lot of generalizations, no longer going into nuances, so rush away judgment. And well, you know, again, cyclical nature of it all. At one point you're not even gonna, you know, take time to go into it. You basically get to a point of understanding where it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to react to your reaction, but I understand how you got to that reaction, so I'm not even going to judge you, because I can understand how I could have gotten to that same reaction based on certain reactions that I've worked out or may be working out. I understand how they came to be, and how up until the questions were asked, those reactions were never really spotted. And even when spotted, I may have a reaction to spotting the reaction by being negative and saying, oh, I'm wrong for doing that. Ones or zeros, ones or zeros. Again, you're not wrong, you just didn't know. Not necessarily understanding the conscious and subconscious habits. So you get into this game and you get into a massive word jargon, Sherlock Holmes style, about various subjects, and you're like, woo, I get this for now. Because there could always be other nuances that you'll pick up later. You allow yourself to be that way, and you allow others to as well, to understand at their own time. We don't all, again, granularity of context and nuance and definition based on our initial and past, so we don't all have that. So we don't need to hold each other to that, which is, again, another behavior of cyclical parenting. The need. Oh, you must be like that. What you said must be. No. You just get rid of it. You let that go. And then you're able to kind of look at the silliness that kind of happens from it from time to time. You know, you're in a much more, as you're not in a reactionary state, you're in a much more, the position you are in is much more helpful towards helping, because it is not done out of a need. It is simply done out of an understanding and a good intention that has deeper nuances. Because again, when we go to intentions, certain people had great intentions, yet they forcefully, again, over compassion. I need you to do that. From my own perception and perspective, that doesn't necessarily contain the entirety of the all, which is not really possible, but potentially possible, because you do, upon you going into these thoughts, and especially at high speed, you begin a bit of a channeling of understanding, and eventually you get those new nuggets, so you do get to learn more, but you don't necessarily get all, if you know what I mean, right? Again, granularity of it all, we are 7 billion different language, different understandings, different evolution of definitions, and blah, 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 blah. So you don't hold yourself to that. Again, you don't judge yourself, you don't hold yourself to that. And the same thing goes to everyone else. So, welcome to the game, because your game, especially as parent, your growth accelerates like crazy. It's inevitable. Your growth accelerates like crazy. And yeah, it gets to be this interesting aspect of just, okay, well, you're going to figure out more things that work for you in the aspect of parenting by reflecting upon how you would feel if it was struck onto you as a, what I mean, struck on like a lightning, no. If it was explained to you, if it was acted upon you at that age, or with that level of understanding, of consciousness, you kind of make this reflection a tad bit more often, and you understand the initial hard drive with much more ease. You reflect back upon it with much more ease. You're like, oh right, initial hard drive, right? You don't necessarily get if somebody would do the same thing to you. So let me take that water balloon and and then whatever drama just turns into a funny aspect, it comes into this fun little interaction. And guess what? You've just shaken off possible old value of, I can't have fun. This is not fun. This could not be fun. No, you're having a general back and forth, and eventually it'll just calm down. Because you're like, all right, truce. And then you bring out the Nerf guns. You become, you get more into a playful dynamic instead of feeling the need for things to be a certain way. You know, feeling that that intentions were negative. You can't mind read intentions. So again, that all comes from the projector. Unless a person clearly says it, then you kind of wonder, did you consciously choose that? Really? Knowing the consequence? Oh, there's another layer to it. You didn't think about the consequences, did you? And then there's more explanations, you know? So again, the whole trophy child complex just destroyed once you understand this very same knowledge, and once you take the time to reflect it, because they are not literally an extension and representation of you. They are their own personality and their own being, but at the same time they are a representation of how you treat others. Some of the habits and behaviors upon reaction, again pointing back towards the reactive mind, later on will reflect back at you, and you start kind of noticing these things here and there, especially in your own behaviors, as you reflect back upon your parents, which were influenced by others. So again, you let go, but you look at it. You trick the brain. Again, use that cheat code. Trick the brain. Say, okay, if I look at those nuances or what happened back then, I'm going to have a tad bit more control, which it's not total control. You're going to have control and understandings of your own inner world. So, and at the same time, you will not, because there's always new things coming. Evolution and expansion is inevitable. So you allow it all and you play with that. But once you're able to spot this kind of chain of passing down, unconscious passing down, because again, would they have asked that question 10 steps later, right? Meaning, if I treat my kid this way, if I teach my kid this way, 10 steps later, how's it going to flip back from an early mind to a momentum? How, right? And then, again, you spot what was within, you let it go. And you understand they never had the chance to ask a question, because we are now with this technology, you know, we are now communicating all these understandings, philosophies, and we've let go of this barrier of me. I need to be right, so I will not look at various other things. One religion, one method of parenting, one method of being, one art style, you know. We've let go of that. We've got too much information for it, you know. We're so connected. And it's not an aspect of competition. It's an aspect of clarity. Remember, compare for clarity. How would this feel? How does this happen? How would this help? 10 steps ahead, how would this be? Instead of competition, well, my kid's going to be better than yours. And my kid has a great grade because I forced them to sit down. Again, we know various cultures that had this issue, and again, cyclical behaviors. And I mean, we know all cultures had that at one point in time of their histories. You could even go back to the tribal aspect of certain things that did not necessarily have this balance yet, or may not. There's multiple tribes we don't necessarily know. Who's going to adventure out there? Well, some people do. But we don't all have their documentaries, so go check those out. So, again, there's so many shit we don't necessarily know about this world, and this brings up to the next video when it comes to creating your own reality, in the technical aspect and what it means on various terms. So just another view on that terminology, okay? So parents, yo, your game is awesome. You are awesome for taking on that challenge, because like, whatever happens leads to multiple other questions, okay? Whatever positive or negative happens leads to more questions, which leads to more inner understanding, which leads to more evolution and creation of various things to either solve problems or either makes things serve even better. And that's my battery. So right now, I am connecting it right before it just shuts off. Woo! Again, I blame you, Dan. I blame you, Dan. Because you make me... Don, not Dan. Don, for like that chain of videos, it's just been channeling over and over. It's been fantastic and wonderful. And again, not a guide, not an absolute. You play with this. You play with this. And you do not shame yourself. Do not bitch on yourself. Do not insult yourself because of unconscious patterns. You're not conscious. Stop it. And then at the same time, you let go of everyone else. You just let go. The only one, okay, that's going to be another video, all right? I'm done. Kick some asses. And if you have questions, feel free to poke. Send text messages. Send Facebook messages. Comments, you know? And it's fun because the more subjects and, let's say, situations we kind of compile and look into, the more understandings we get. This isn't reading from a script. This isn't prepping. This is just channeled because the thought speed goes so fast and the mind doesn't necessarily block anymore, that it just comes true. And as you've noticed, there's sometimes where it's like, whoa, terminology, a bit wrong, I've been judging here, or maybe I'm generalizing a bit too much there. And of course, it's always ever increasing. It's sometimes you never really pick it up, but it's a flow state. You always discover what you discover at the time that you discover it. That's the inevitable truth in life. So upon understanding that, whoa, let it go. And you just go. And you also catch yourself. So it's always about this game. Let go, let loose. But then balance. But then let go, let loose. But then balance. You know, always ask yourself, in an extreme, 10 steps ahead, what's this going to bring? Okay? In not an extreme. What about in the other extreme? You know, you always ask yourself. And then you'll find out. You play with that. And you can pick up from others as well, you know. Balance what you see as imbalance, or balance things that, to balance them in a way that you would prefer or feel more natural to you, you know. It's not ones or zeros. It's this amazing gray area. All right. Later, guys. Thanks again.